Ketamine has become a popular topic. What people are not talking about enough is that the improvement that people see are not permanent.
We obviously know that ketamine is used to treat anxiety and depression. Can you talk about how it's supposed to be used in a clinical setting?
Ketamine, it's been around for decades as an anesthetic, and it causes an altered state of consciousness, and that could be very beneficial for psychological therapy and breakthroughs.
Hi, my name is Kayla Rochelle. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and what we've learned about ketamine is that it alters your state of mind. It never really addresses the root cause. Here's more about how ketamine works. Imagine a timeline where you have your initial trigger, the onset of what would have caused an emotional reaction. And then let's say that there are multiple events that occur that also cause emotional reaction. Ketamine rewires a person's brain so that a person learns to react to the triggering event prior instead of the initial onset. We know this concept as the extinction principle. In traditional therapy, a person can learn the intricacies, the ins and outs of why behavior is happening. A therapist can guide a person to understand that, hey, this stimulus or this enticing thing, this rewarding thing caused you to behave this way, or it caused reinforcements in this way. It developed a pattern in this way. And a therapist can guide a person to know what is acceptable or what is not acceptable. Ketamine, however, is simply just releasing chemicals in a brain to trick the reward or the reinforcement principles. In other words, it's essentially a shortcut to producing change. Per autopsy reports, the amount of ketamine that was found in Matthew Perry's system was equivalent to the amount that would be given for general anesthesia. It's evident that Matthew Perry was self-medicating. So you might ask, what were the mental health symptoms that drove Matthew Perry into a spiral of drug addiction and alcohol abuse? At 14, he disclosed that he felt this deep, dark hole inside. Later in his memoir, he talked about wanting fame, praying for fame to be the thing to fill this dark hole inside. We understand that he experienced shame, loneliness, and fear because of his alcoholism. He experienced loneliness, emptiness, and inadequacy, which we can assume was depression, and he's verbalized his struggles with anxiety. The medication combination that Matthew Perry had in his system at the time of death was a lethal combination. It contained buprenorphine, which is an opiate, lorazepam, clonazepam, 2 types of benzodiazepines, and lastly, ketamine. These are all downers. We know that through Matthew Perry's life is that he traded one addiction for another. He saw pills as an opportunity to curb his desire to drink alcohol.
Secrets kill you. Secrets kill people like me.
The reality is that ketamine is only a trade-off for a way to deal with the hurt, the emptiness, the shame, or the abnormality that people can feel.
It causes an altered state of consciousness. Third state of consciousness. Third state of consciousness.
A couple of the numbers that really depict the severity of Matthew Perry's mental illness is as follows. He attended 6,000 AA meetings. He was in therapy for 30 years. He estimates attending 15 rehabs. Half of his life was spent in treatment or sober living homes. He estimates going into detox at least 65 times. He had 14 surgeries, was in a coma for 14 days, and in a hospital for 5 months. Matthew Perry defines an addiction as an obsession of the mind that says, give me everything that you gave me before and more. By the age of 18, he found himself drinking daily. In his famous star role in the TV show Friends, he was consuming about 55 Vicodin per day. This led him to methadone treatment, Xanax, and drinking 1 quart of vodka per day. This was also while he was still on a film set. He was easily deemed as a functioning alcoholic. In his memoir, he states, "For a start, I've surrendered, but to the winning side, not the losing side. I'm no longer mired in an impossible battle with drugs and alcohol." What ketamine does is that it trains the brain through memory traces to no longer respond in fear to the trigger prior. Another way of putting that is that a person never deals with the onset of that fear. So it begs the question, what happens to that initial trigger. People come to therapy because they want to deal with unwanted behaviors. And through a process of guiding a person to recognize what triggers unwanted behaviors through thoughts and emotions that might be connected to it, a person can essentially train their brain to think differently about various circumstances. There's neurological pathways that are being restructured through the work that happens in traditional therapy. With ketamine treatment, it is being explored as a non-conventional type of therapy to treat trauma and depression. Studies show that only 60% of people respond positively to SSRIs. Those are common current antidepressant medications that are being prescribed. And half of that population, so 30%, see a reduction in symptoms enough to discontinue it. This leaves experts wanting to explore new treatments like ketamine. See, when we want to send signals throughout our body, those signals travel through our brain cells or nerve cells called neurons. The carriers of those signals are called neurotransmitters. A common saying in the psychological space is what happens psychological is happening biological. The human brain is estimated to have 86 billion neurons with an identified 100 distinct neurotransmitters. Some are responsible for memory, alertness, mood, and arousal. Ketamine is an anesthetic, a chemical compound that provides pain relief, sedation, or amnesia. Glutamate is a neurotransmitter that ketamine seems to work with. Let's geek out. When our brain wants to send signals throughout our body, chemical reactions are happening. Neurotransmitters carry those action potentials or signals from one neuron to another. The chemical compound that the neurotransmitter was carrying is released and received by the adjacent neuron, which continues sending the signal until it reaches its final destination. Ketamine is known to make glutamate more available. Glutamate is the neurotransmitter that's responsible for memory, and as a result, ketamine restructures memory traces. There's some controversy about ketamine. Ketamine is known to extinguish fear from the trigger prior, but never the initial trigger. Here's a recap. Imagine a timeline where you have your initial trigger, the onset of what would have caused an emotional reaction. And then let's say that there are multiple events that occur that also cause emotional reaction. Ketamine rewires a person's brain so that a person learns to react to the triggering event prior instead of the initial onset. Here's what the research tells us. The re-emergence of fear extinction is known to occur, meaning the memory traces that ketamine redefined can be undone under 3 circumstances. Number 1, renewal, when the trigger is presented outside of the extinction context. Number 2, reinstatement will happen when the trigger is presented unexpectedly. Number 3, spontaneous recovery happens after substantial time has passed, fear will reoccur. This is why more research is needed to prove whether or not ketamine truly is producing lasting change.